Comprehensive and extensive projects along this trail, I think, are necessary and needed for us to really maximize this opportunity that we have, not only for things that the Conservation Fund are doing, but things that other institutional investors, as well as the Biden-Harris administration has before us through various agencies and departments. The goal is to have most of these planned improvements complete in time for the 60th anniversary of the Selma-Montgomery March in 2025. However, we hope that you'll see progress on a myriad of individual projects immediately. And as the mayor of Montgomery, it's important for us to make sure that we're operating in a regional capacity to collaborate with not just communities that within our immediate vicinity, but also histories that we have communities that we have a shared and connected history to. And when you think about the civil rights movement and Montgomery serving as the birthplace of that movement, it's important that we utilize our resources and some of the things that we have as a state government capital to assist our partners across the state. And, part of what we're doing is we hope that not only we educate and inform people around our local communities, but really around the state of Alabama and the nation. And whether it's through the Civil Rights Trail, whether it's through the Equal Justice Initiatives, Legacy Museum and Memorial for Peace and Justice, there are a lot of things that bring people here, but we know there's a lot more history throughout the state of Alabama. And we want to help uplift that any way that we can. And this is really the first time our communities have come together in such a collaborative and deliberate way to commit to doing what's necessary to preserve, protect, and revitalize communities along the Selma-to-Montgomery Voting Rights Trail. And our plan, again, is to come to a consensus on what we can achieve in just a few short years to ensure that people and places along the trail receive the attention and the interest that is possible. This collaboration works in tandem with what the city is doing for the Oak Street corridor, as well as our plan to attract new, smart, and sustainable development projects in West Montgomery as well as South Montgomery. In fact, we'll kick off our West Montgomery development tour on Wednesday morning. And for those of you who are not familiar with West Montgomery, if you come in on Highway 80 from Selma, from Marion, from Lowndes County, you're coming into West Montgomery as you enter the city. That is the Selma-Montgomery historically designated Voting Rights Trail, which was designated under President Bill Clinton as former Secretary of Transportation, Rodney Slater reminded me of on yesterday. And because of that, there are opportunities, I believe, for us to partner with not only the Parks and National Park Service, but also the Department of Interior for investments and for partnerships there. And I think we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can in order to maximize that with the current administration that we have in Washington. But once we complete these projects, we want to see tangible and substantive development. That is the goal, is to bring investment, is to bring a level of investment to these communities that has really been missing for decades, not just years. And we also want to say that any way we can be helpful, we want to do just that. I've shared this with Mayor Perkins on calls that we've had around the Alabama Black Mayors Association. We want to assist in ways that we believe we should as a partner in this, as a partner and want to see our communities grow along the Civil Rights Trail, but also communities throughout the state of Alabama. And with that, I want to just highlight a few of our members of our Department of Economic Development. They lead a lot of these initiatives. I know we have Robert Smith, who is our Director of Planning. We also have Desmond Wilson. Desmond, you'll raise your hand, who is with Community Development. Lois also in our Economic Development Department. And I don't think I'm missing anybody else. Oh, right here. A couple of folks, okay. That's what happens when we start calling names. So we've got a good group of our economic development department that's here with us. So, I'll say a few words and then I've got another engagement that I may have to lead the panel for. But these are really the experts. These are the folks who kind of guide us and who kind of help us along the way in terms of funding as well as in terms of grants and other ideas and initiatives that we're trying to do. So they should be able to answer any questions that may come up in my absence. That said, I want to turn it over to fellow mayors and the Conservation Fund to get us going on this panel, and we'll do the Q&A. But again, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for all the work that you do in your communities. We're excited about the possibility of this partnership, and we really believe that we can make some great things happen. And this is a very unique moment in time. I keep saying this, and there's nothing I haven't said here in the city. Because of where the Biden-Harris administration has placed dollars, the access to those dollars, and the ability for counties and cities and towns of all sizes to utilize that. Even had that conversation with Congresswoman Terry Sewell just on Monday when she was here. So we want to continue to be an advocate. We want to continue to be a partner and a leader where we can, and where we need to follow, we'll do that as well. So thank you all so much. Welcome to Montgomery. We want you to have a great time here. Make yourself at home. Let's make this a productive day. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. All right. Well, I'm Destiny Williams. I have the pleasure of, well, first let me talk a little bit about myself. I'm Destiny Williams. I am a Yorktown, Virginia native and an Alabama transplant. I grew up in the Tarentum community of Brundage, Alabama, in Pike County. And I have the pleasure of serving as the partnership coordinator for the Alabama River Diversity Network, in which we are partners to the Conservation Fund. And before we get started and I talk a little bit about the Alabama River Diversity Network, I want to first, on behalf of our network, express our gratitude to the City of Montgomery and to the Conservation Fund for hosting this very, very important stakeholders meeting and panel discussion as we pursue a collective approach to unifying, preserving, and authentically representing the stories and resources connected to the rich history and culture that lives here. So the Alabama River Diversity Network is a statewide sponsored project of the Ocean Foundation, and we're dedicated to reconnecting communities to their home landscape and rebuilding the connections between the Alabama River region's natural resources, human history, and cultural diversity. Many of Arden's partners have been really working together for over a decade, facilitating cross-network collaborations that advance a multidisciplinary approach to conservation planning and prioritize place-based storytelling as a core component to protecting and preserving our region's rich history. Our mission is to reimagine and create synergistic relationships that unify our diverse human populations and the Alabama River region's biodiverse landscape. With that being said, I do want to just say this before turning it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. We recognize that Alabama's nationally significant centers for biodiversity and human history work at various intersections and crossroads and create a phenomenon that truly shapes this nation in many ways. And it comes as no surprise that us as a people here in Alabama and the stories of Alabama are just as complex as the land itself. And those complexities lend to the diversity of cultures and complex histories that we must engage in order to truly understand how precious and fragile this place truly is. So from Marion to Montgomery, the interconnectivity between the natural, historical, and cultural resources that really created the perfect conditions for the Selma-to-Montgomery March to occur here is valuable enough to do exactly what we are doing today. Begin a conversation to combat single narratives and dominating perspectives that may threaten the synergy between these four great cities. Now I'm going to turn it over to the panel in the order that they are sitting from right to left. Please introduce yourselves. You do not require any introduction. We all know you, but if you will, please just tell us a little bit about yourself in your city.
Good morning. Delmartre, Bethel, the mayor of the town of Whitehall. This is my first term, and I'm honored to, sit up here alongside these guys to try to work with some type of solution. Thank you.
Stephen Reed, Mayor Montgomery.
And James Perkins, Mayor, City of Selma.
Dexter, Hinton, Mayor of Marion.
Excellent. Thank you all. I want to say to our guests, welcome to the City of Montgomery, and we really do look forward to a fruitful discussion today. So our conversation today will be grounded in 3 core questions, and we're going to hear from each of you on each question. After everyone has had a chance to answer the questions, we'll open the floor up for additional comments if you have any. And then you'll all have an opportunity to share any final thoughts before passing the mic to Philip for closing remarks. So we'll get started. Our first question, I'm going to direct to Mayor Hinton. What role does civil rights history play in your vision for your respective city?
Where now it will greatly improve our economic development. Our city has so much foundation, and to remember the Civil Rights Trail, to remember and that history and bring about tours, it'll impact our community economically, but also in remembrance of the civil rights activists.
Mayor Perkins?
Selma's history defines Selma's brand. Selma is a small micropolitan, in other words, a small city surrounded by a much larger community, rural community, and the consequence of Selma's contribution to history, not just in March 7th and March, let me just say the month of March of 1965, including also April of 1865, our history clearly establishes our brand and the name recognition throughout the world. And so history is key and pivotal to tourism, which is one of the largest industries we have in our community right now.
Mayor Bethel?
Well, I would say it would definitely impact Whitehall overall, because Whitehall, our soil is rich in history. But sometimes it seems as if a lot of key parts of history is left untold, and so I think now is the time we can actually tell the story in Whitehall, and it'll help us out, as Mayor Perkins said, and it'll help bring, I think, the town up from where it is.
Mayor Reed?
I think for us here in Montgomery, we have to match the past with the purpose, and I think we've done a great job of promoting the history. I don't think the city has always lived up to that substantively, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that these things are not just taglines, they're not just hashtags, they're not just things to bring people here for our tourism dollars. We have a responsibility and obligation, if you will, to make sure that everything that we market, we believe and we implement. And that has not been the case, and it's still a struggle in its current form. And so for us, that the history is a guidepost of what has been wrought in America and what has been right in America. And it's not a day when we are talking about the present and future of the city that we don't acknowledge things that have happened here in the past. And for us moving forward, it's important, in my opinion, that we utilize our place in history not only to teach others, but to remind ourselves of what we can do when we come together and what stops us when we are apart. And I think that really is a driving point for our policy. It's a driving point for our overall political philosophy, and it has to be a driving point for economic opportunity. And that's what we're trying to do really across the board for things that we have as a part of our administrative agenda and things that we have as a way of trying to export to the country and the world.
Thank you all. You've all made really great points about not just the economic development needs that can be addressed through developing our stories here, but most importantly, uplifting our rural communities. Montgomery is the city center here in the Black Belt, and but the majority of the Black Belt is definitely rural and can definitely benefit from the economic development opportunities that this comes along with. But most importantly, we have a responsibility, as you all said, to teach the nation and teach ourselves. And I think that definitely is a connecting point between all of your comments. So I do want to ask a little bit further, Mayor Perkins, how important do you think partnerships are to the future of the trail?
If you go back to the original master plan for the trail, I think it was under Secretary Babbitt where the Friends of the Trail organization was formed. It had a sunset date of 10 years, so it expired. But that Friends group established 3 individual but connected Friends groups. One in Montgomery, I think at the time Dr. Gwen Patton was the chair. One in Lowndes County, Bob Mance was the chair. And then one in Selma, Dr. F.D. Reese was the chair. And those 3 Friends groups were connected with an umbrella organization. Their purpose was to manage or provide oversight for the development of the trail. So from the very beginning, the whole idea was to maintain a seamless strategy for the development of the trail. In fact, it was in one of those organizing meetings where it was decided that Lowndes County would have the first interpretive center. And that was done because Lowndes County had the greatest need and they had green space. You had a place to actually build. Selma, then we said that we'll take second on that one, even though Selma was the beginning of the trail. Nothing taken from Marion, because if not for James Orange being arrested in a night protest where Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed, then James Bevel would not have come up with the idea of transporting Jimmy Lee Jackson's body to the state capitol steps. Thus, the genesis, the idea of a march from Selma to Montgomery. And so it is important. I think this is great that we are now moving back into the original master plan and bringing these ideas together, because you can't tell the full story without all of the parts.
Same question to you, Mayor Reed.
I think partnerships are vital. Again, I think that in order for us to be as effective, we do that when we're working together. We do that when we're connected, both small communities and large and mid-sized cities. And when all of the leaders in our respective communities are able to talk to one another about what should be a priority, what things may be secondary, and what things maybe should be something that's more of a long-term goal. And I think you get that when you're talking to people who have a shared interest, shared history, but may come to it from different perspectives. And I think for this to be as successful as we'd all like for it to become, that means really hearing one another and taking input from various communities about what needs to happen and when and how. And Montgomery can't do it by itself, nor should it. And I think that is the beauty of this conversation, and what Mayor Perkins has stated was the original history, and getting back to that for us right now.
Thank you. Mayor Hinton?
Well, it's a privilege for Marion to be considered. We have been left out of the trail for a while, And with collaboration, I think that we can be added back in and kind of grow this trail. And it's truly a privilege. Again, Jimmy Lee Jackson lost his life in the city of Marion, and it impacted the world, not just Alabama, just the United States, impacted the world, civil rights. And for us to be included to get that started, I think it's an awesome foundation, even to work with Selma and Montgomery and Lowndes County, that they build on top of bringing in more revenue to actually sustain this trail. And we look forward to just being involved in this. Thank you.
And Mayor Bethel?
I would say partnerships are real important. Like everybody mentioned, if we're gonna tell the story, let's tell the whole story. And what better way to tell the story, other than everybody's, working together, being on the same page, one accord. So we don't have the resources, but, I'm confident that this conversation today would help us out and, move us forward in the right direction. So.
Excellent. So I'd like to continue with you, Mayor Bethel, and can you just talk to us a little bit about what type of resources you would like to see introduced to the Black Belt region to help preserve African American heritage sites?
Well, pretty much, I'd say we're open to all resources, because right now, like I said, the town of Whitehall, Lowndes County itself, our funding is limited. And, as Mayor Perkins said, we have the land, but for whatever reason, the history that happened right in Whitehall, we just haven't been able to physically go out and see. So some of the same stuff that we see in Montgomery and Selma, I would like to see, some similar things within Lowndes County and town of Whitehall itself.
Mayor Perkins?
We're open to all resources, Mayor. That's absolutely true. But in being more specific, I think Selma's deficit would be in hotels, hospitality, industry support, if you would. I want to be careful in my comments because in speaking of that need, I may be taking a few dollars from Montgomery, but we want to try to get people to come to Selma and stay for a visit, to actually get a good feel of the full breadth and scope of Selma's history. As I look through the audience, I see Dr. Verdale Dawson, who represents the Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church, their historic structure that people may not get a chance to see if they don't stay. There are other sites that we would love to have visited. I see Dr. Stanley Angion, the president of Selma University, had a significant role in the history. People don't get an opportunity to visit that site, but if they could stay overnight and had a couple of places to eat while they're there, it would help the economy for sure, would help lift the quality of life of the people who actually live in our area, and would be a more shared distribution of the resources as a result of tourism.
Thank you. Mayor Hinton?
Well, right now we have several historic locations in the city of Marion that's being revitalized. With this panel and us working together, I hope that the state could earmark more funds for our area to support our roads and our infrastructure, because we want to have that for our citizens, but to support tourism, we have to improve our infrastructure, and that's broadband, that's roadways, that's water, that's sewage, to accommodate, and we hope to get additional hotels, so when people do come, they can stay in the city of Marion. So we're looking for a total improvement of our infrastructure, and also with going green with the charging stations, with electric vehicles and things like that, we need to be able to accommodate all the way across the spectrum.
Thank you. Mayor Reed?
I think, private investment, institutional investors, as well as that from philanthropy is important for our city, whether it's through education and workforce development, affordable housing, and even, speaking to individual projects, the expansion of our airport. Part of that for us is very key, and we think it's important to job growth, not only in Montgomery, but the Black Belt itself. And we've announced roughly over 4,000 jobs that'll be coming to an area just off of Mobile Highway, Highway 31, just south of Highway 80 in Montgomery County, adjacent to Lowndes County. When you consider that those people need places to live, they need places to shop and places to eat. And for us, with the inland port bringing 2,500 of those jobs in 2 years, we believe that we can be a center for freight and logistics, transportation of your packages, whether it be from Amazon, DHL, FedEx, or anyone else that's shipping to your home. And that opens up the economy. The big thing for us, I think, in particular, in West Montgomery, leveraging the airport and leveraging the Civil Rights Trail is to understand it's not just enough for people to give surface level prayers and remembrances. That doesn't pay the bills. That doesn't provide jobs. It doesn't provide economic opportunity. And the investment that we're looking for in Montgomery is one that will have a regional effect. All the people coming for those jobs that I just mentioned won't live in Montgomery. They will come throughout the Black Belt, which is great. But we have to make sure that as the regional capital of Central Alabama, that we're on firm footing to make sure that we can have the type of impact in this part of the state that Montgomery heretofore has not, at least for many decades. So we see the airport as being very key to that, because air travel is key to growth, is key to your economy, and without the growth and the transformation of that airport, then our economy in Central Alabama is going to be limited, and it's going to be really faced with a low ceiling. And that's with the tourism coming in for the Civil Rights Trail. We have to have substantive investment here that will propel this region forward in a way like we see in parts of North Alabama, parts of South Alabama, and the I-20 corridor between Tuscaloosa and Birmingham and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I have one more follow-up question, and I'll direct this question to Mayor Bethel, and then we can just go straight down the row. We've heard a lot about, what each city, what your visions are for each city, and what each city needs, and how it benefits the Black Belt as a whole and Alabama as a whole. Will you just talk a little bit about what you think a collective opportunity looks like for the preservation of these sites, in terms of how you imagine the four cities, your cities working together, cross-promoting? What are just some examples of what that looks like for you?
I think what it looks like to me is, when people travel along the trail, it's when you go through certain parts of the trail, like I said, the information is vague. If you're traveling from Selma to Montgomery, when you're passing through Whitehall, Lowndes County, nobody even know you're in Whitehall. It's like a through and through. So for me, what it looks like is when you're traveling from Selma to Montgomery, once you make it in Whitehall, you see a resemblance of, the history, but also what you see when you're traveling in big towns or big cities like Montgomery and Selma.
Mary?
I think that, I'm going to go back a step. I think that the partnership has to be not just collaborative, but it has to be one that's well thought out. And I'm thinking about a conversation I had with former Ambassador Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young last year, and he talked about why they came to Selma, he and Dr. King, and he talked about Marion being forgotten about. His first and longtime wife who passed away, Jean Childs, is from Marion, as is my mother, Molly Perry. And he talked about what he believed were some opportunities that were lost in the post-civil rights movement for parts of the Black Belt. And he talked about making international connections and not being limited to just the state government. And one of the examples he gave me was that when Atlanta wanted to expand the then Hartsfield Airport, which is now Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, Ronald Reagan, President Reagan had put a cap on how much funding they were going to put in airports. So he said they had to go to the Dutch government, and they borrowed $400 million to expand Hartsfield Airport under his administration. And he referenced that because he said, if you all are just depending on the state legislature, you're never going to be able to do what you want to do, not in your lifetime. And he really has a heart for Selma. He really has a heart for Marion. And his point to me was, think outside of the traditional means of investors and think about ways that you may partner with international governments and companies that have an affinity for this history. In many countries in Europe, there is an affinity for this history. So we have to, I think, be very aggressive and very open, maybe in terms of even putting together a trade delegation to speak with some of these companies and some of these foreign leaders that would be interested, like the Dutch, in the history around the Black Belt, in the amount of land that's available, the type of farming, the type of businesses that can be done. And I think for me, that's what the history gives us. It gives us a narrative. It gives us a story. I talk to a lot of mayors across the country, and I'll tell them, your cities may be bigger, but your story isn't. And you can say the same for all of the other communities up here because they're all interconnected. I think we have to leverage that story, certainly with the tourism department, but also leverage it with the Alabama Department of Commerce and those that have allies and interested parties that, like Ambassador Young, want to see Selma thrive, want to see Lowndes County thrive because of its history with the Black Panthers, want to see Marion and Perry County thrive. I just think that what we're doing here today is a great start. It's a great beginning for us. But I go back to Ambassador Young, who just turned 90 years old this year, that we have to think in a non-traditional way, and we have to think really in an unconventional way if we're really going to be able to help the communities and help the people and bring resources back. But we've got the narrative, and I think that this is a great start to the conversation so that there is retail, so that there is a thriving industry in these spaces, bringing jobs, and thereby you have people who are now moving there, coming back home to live and work there, bringing their talents to move these communities forward. I know that was a long answer to your question, but I thought giving it that perspective was fit because Ambassador Young has a real strong sentiment for Selma and Marion, and he would be someone that I know we could reach out to, and obviously has a long Rolodex of people that can be called maybe to assist us once we do some of the initial groundwork with the Conservation Fund and others to get this off the ground.
Thank you so much. Mayor Perkins?
Man, I so appreciate Mayor Reed's comments. And the mentioning of Ambassador Young, former Mayor Young, and also the international connectivity with his history. Just last week, Selma was visited by a group from Barcelona, Spain. And there's not a week that goes by when some international tourist comes through our community. I've always looked for ways to make them welcome. But Mayor, I gotta be honest with you, I never thought about that possible investment opportunity for our community and our region. So I've learned something this morning and would love to work collectively to try and work on some kind of initiative to make that happen. But not only that, it took some scheduling, rearranging to get here today because there's 2 busloads of folks coming into Selma today from Tupelo, Mississippi. wanting to know about this history. And so there's, and with Ambassador Young and, just 2 years ago, I traveled with him and with Dr. Bernard Lafayette to go out west to discuss this history because people are interested and concerned about what happened in our communities. We've got to do a better job of telling our story, not just to our visitors, but with our children, because our story has not just financial value. In order to ensure its longevity, we need to understand it and authenticate it and know it. And we don't do a good job of that. I'm at fault as well. We cannot, somebody's got to say something controversial up here today. I won't make the news. We cannot allow our history to be tagged as critical race theory, and we run from telling our story. We have to do this. It's not to offend anyone. It's just to ensure that people know the truth. And that's not just about the voting rights and civil rights history. It's important that we tell the truth about our Civil War history. The truth of the matter is the Confederacy lost, and we need to tell that story because that is a significant part of the history of this region. It's a significant part of Montgomery's history, of Lowndes County's history, and Perry County's history, and Dallas County's history. The Port of Mobile was significant to that history, and we need to tell that story as well. And so as we move through this process, I think this is the last question, so I'll be a little long-winded too there. My hope is that we really take our time to get this right. This is too important to rush through and get it wrong. We need to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hinton?
Yes, teamwork makes the dream work, and the strength come in numbers, and I'm just super excited. I don't even think this platform is still large enough. This is a starting point. This story needs to be told across the world because I know no greater love than a man who will lay down his life for his fellow man, and this occurred in the civil rights movement. And we need to tell this story worldwide, and we need this platform large enough so we can attract the world here. And I think that we're moving in the right direction.
Excellent. Let's give our mayors a round of applause, if we will. Very thoughtful answers to these questions. We really do appreciate that. And at this time, we have a few minutes. We'd love to open the floor for questions, if there are any. Okay. Is a microphone coming to you?
Thank you. I'm Charles P. Everett IV, Project Director for the restoration of Mount Zion El Zion Church Memorial Annex. I would hope that one of the building blocks to your plans will be comprehensive safety and security. And I don't know that I heard anything from anybody about that. In this environment, we've got a lot of individuals who'd like to see these historic resources go away. I-85 and I-65 attempted to do that, and we can recite some of the historic landmarks lost when that took place, when those interstate highways were constructed. But as Mayor Perkins, as those 2 busloads of tourists come into Selma, as these busloads of tourists come into Montgomery and other places, I would hope that we keep comprehensive safety and security as something that's up front. How do we preserve and keep these resources safe? How do we keep the tourists safe as they come? I look in this auditorium, which is a historic landmark, and I see a sprinkler system. How many of these historic landmarks that we are attempting to preserve have sprinkler systems? You think about Notre Dame and how it was almost lost because there was not sufficient water to put the fire out. So, there are all kinds of ways of looking at comprehensive safety, perimeter fencing, security cameras, etc. But I would hope that as you build your plans, that one of the building blocks will be comprehensive safety. And I'd like to hear someone from the panel say a word or two about that, please. Thank you.
Well, a couple of points. One, as we go through the renovations of these historic sites, the state building code requires us to meet certain standards for fire protection and suppression. And so I think if you look into the state building codes, you will find some means of getting that done. As it relates to, your question is really interesting to me, especially when you mention I-65 and I-85, because the construction of those interstate systems significantly boost the economic opportunities within those communities. 85% of economic development in this nation takes place within 5 miles of an interstate exchange. One of the biggest problems we have in the western part of this state is we don't have an interstate. And so I would not want to start pitting or having a competition with historic preservation and the need for an interstate. We need I-14, that's just real. And if and the longer that's delayed, the longer the development of not just the Black Belt region of the state will take. I'm convinced that if we were to develop an interstate through the Black Belt, and what I'm really talking about, folks, is coming from Texas to Georgia through I-14. And doing that really changes this entire state. If we were to lift the Black Belt region, which is one of the lowest, has the lowest economic, health, and education indicators in this state, if we were to lift that region, we would lift the state of Alabama up probably within the top 10 of all states in this nation. We cannot continue to put our own feet on our own necks and think that we are going to get better. We are not. You're going to have to help Marion. You're going to have to help Whitehall. You're going to have to help Selma in order for us to help the state of Alabama. In terms of economic development, historic preservation, these things should not be pitted against one another because that will hurt us, not help us. Thank you.
I would like to respond to that question. For the city of Marion, I can say we've paired with our local institution, MMI, who started a firefighting program, and that has improved our fire department. We are also with our police department addressing younger police officers to go to the academy so they can be well trained with the new guidelines that have been coming out. And I also concur with Mayor Perkins with the building codes. As far as the sites, they have to meet certain specifications by the building code. But for the people, the more people that comes, the more increase in revenue, and that will give us a larger budget to add more public safety.
We'll take another question.
Good morning. I'm Pastor Ronald Davis, Day Street Baptist Church. And I would hope that in all of our discussions and conservation that we won't miss out and leave out the spiritual connection that we have brought us thus far. You know, the civil rights movement and all the icons, we would not be celebrating them if it had not been for ministers. And the connectivity of the church and the conservation of all that we talk about, we need to be sure that we understand that the building block of the church, the civil rights movement was very much a spiritual movement. And how do we lift the masses of our people was what thrusted us to where we are. And so what we would do to maintain that viability of spirituality as we move forward.
Well, I know we've got one pastor up here on the panel, so I'm gonna let him lead that question.
Good to see you, Pastor Ron. I just know we are in 100% agreement. Definitely recognize the faith-based support of the movement, and it is not being overlooked. I think in my earlier comments, I mentioned Tabernacle. I could very easily mention First Baptist Brown Chapel. I think Brown Chapel renovation team is represented here this morning. And I also mentioned Selma University, which is a minister's teaching school that was a part of the movement. And so we definitely want to make certain that those stories are not left out. But I do agree with you, sir. Thank you.
I would like to make a statement on that also. It says that he's coming back one day, and from my perspective, I think that he's already here, and he lives through each and every one of us based on our actions and showing love. And with the Civil Rights Trail, the whole intent was to bring equality to everyone, and just not one particular group of people. And I think that based on us moving forward with this trail and getting everything together as need be, it's showing love, and he's always in the midst of love.
Minister Hinton, I got a pastor minister's license in my dress drawer for you. We can go ahead and get you licensed.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'd just like to say I am a product of the West Side, product of the civil rights. I lived on a half a block from Hope Street Baptist Church, maybe 2 or 3 blocks from Mount Zion. And I remember when the interstate came through and it divided a lot of families and a lot of people. And it had some positive, but it had some negative effect. And where I'm going with this, and I want this to go directly to my mayor of Montgomery. I still stay out in Woodcrest. This is my old neighbor here. I just want you to tell me, how do you visualize this revamp? How it's going to have an impact when I come off a highway and get on Highway 8 and get on Mobile Highway and go up this whole trail? What's your vision of how it should look?
It should look like, thank you for the question, it should look like something we can be proud of, given the impact that was made by everyday people, friends and family alike, who sacrificed so much. And what we saw as the 65-85 interchange was brought in was we saw a eastward expansion of the city of Montgomery. That was not by accident. In part, that was due to race, but in part it was due to easy land accessibility. With that, there was a divestment of resources in West Montgomery. And again, for those who are not from here, this is the part of town that if you're going I-65, if you're getting off to go to Selma, getting off to go to Whitehall, and Marion on Highway 80, that's most of West Montgomery when you're coming north-south on I-65. And the county is putting in a major development with the Whitewater Park that will exist on Maxwell Boulevard. Our focus has been and continues to be what happens from Fairview all the way on around to West South Boulevard. And so we're bringing in investors next week, I believe, for a tour of land that's available in sites. We have done a corridor study on I-65 and West South Boulevard, about a mile and a half corridor that will lead you to that Mobile Highway entry point that you're talking about. And the goal would be to have the same amenities that you would have on that exit as you would any other exit on 65 if you're in Hoover, if you're in Alabaster, or if you're in Prattville. So we believe that if we can bring retail there, because it sits in an opportunity zone, which is controversial to some people, but it's there as is 2/3 of Montgomery, that's attractive to institutional investors because it gives them a cap, if you will, in some cases I think an abatement on the capital gains tax. So it makes it more attractive for them to come in and put hundreds of millions of dollars. When Michael Regan was here, we were going to Selma to tour the interpretive center there and to cross the bridge. I pointed out to him that exit, and I pointed out to him the history of that. He was already familiar with it, and I know he just went to Lowndes County with Mitch Landrieu to address the water and sewer issues there. Michael Regan is the EPA administrator. He's a product of North Carolina A&T University. He very much understands the plight of historically black communities, poor communities, whether it be in the Carolinas or whether it be in the Delta. And one of the things that he shared with me was using federal resources to help us with development and leveraging the environmental impacts that have been made there to help us acquire land and then to potentially develop that. I mentioned the jobs that will be going down Highway 31, upwards of 4,000 plus jobs we've already announced. That means that we are going to have to market those sites and that land for further development, housing, multi-use housing, retail, as well as commercial. There's interest there right now. So we like for West Montgomery, to sum this up, to look just like East Montgomery when you come in. I don't think that's a far off goal. I just don't think the interest has been there. I don't think the intentionality has been there. And I think that's why it has suffered in my 48 years have been born here, since that time. So as we talk to corporate, philanthropic, and institutional partners, we talk about the Civil Rights Trail. And our point to them is there's no more significant area that you can invest in this country than being right here on this trail in Montgomery, Alabama. And I think that spillover effect will help surrounding communities if we're able to get it off the ground here. And it's up to us to get it off the ground. I'm not fooling myself in understanding where Montgomery sits. I give you a little bit of history and where the purpose was here. And the purpose was to drive growth and development to the east of Montgomery. Well, we've capped out on that. We've gotten as far east as we can go without getting to another town. So we are now focusing on bringing that same focus of this local government and state government to assist us in West Montgomery. And I think by doing that and leveraging I-65, leveraging Highway 80, we've got the opportunity to really transform that area and transform the trail. And if we transform the trail here in Montgomery, it will impact Lowndes County. It will impact Dallas County. It will impact Perry County. There's no question about that. But we have to be the leaders. And Montgomery hasn't led in that because they weren't interested in that, to be frank with you. They weren't interested in West Montgomery. They weren't interested in the Civil Rights Trail at all. And so that started November 12, 2019 when I got elected. And that's what we've been doing with a lot of the folks that you see in this room and those that are not in this room are focusing our energy and efforts there. And that's why I had the conversation with former Atlanta Mayor and Ambassador Andrew Young about this area and what we could do outside of government. Because I think that our state government is only going to do so much, and I don't want to have to depend on the state legislature to really butter my bread for what we got to do to really help people in this city who need the help and who deserve it.
Thank you all so very much. We actually are out of time for questions, but once again, we do want to say thank you to all the mayors who are on the panel, and I extend you another round of applause if we can.
Thank you.
For starting this conversation, and I do, if I may urge everyone in the audience to join it and take it back to your communities. Thank you all for having me as your moderator. I'm going to turn it over to Philip Howard for closing remarks.
Wow. Thank you to the mayors for attending. Thank you, Mayor Reed, for hosting us. I know we had a couple other people with questions. What we hope is this is the kickoff to answering all the questions that you all have about how we can collectively move forward and tell the entire story of not only the Selma-to-Montgomery Trail, but the region and really the state. So we certainly look forward to that. And just quickly how this meeting came about. Really, it came about from speaking to partners, you all that are here, where you wanted to hear from the leaders of the community. And it came together kind of organically. I think we wrapped everything up in the last few days, but we're certainly, Mayor Reed, your staff worked with us, Mayor Hinton, Mayor Bethel, Mayor Perkins, all of y'all's staff. You all hired some wonderful people. They're working hard for you all, and really the people of your community. I would like to say, before I go even forward, thank you to those in the audience who have been protecting this history, who love this history, who do it when no one is looking, when you get no thank yous. But we appreciate you all, and we thank you all. And hopefully we can put together plans in place that will come and support and advance the work that you all have been doing all of this time. So we certainly are appreciative of the effort that you all have done. What's next? Nobody really likes meetings, but there are going to be meetings next. We're going to have conversations about how we can collectively come together and work together from Marion to Selma to Whitehall, Lowndes County to Montgomery, how we can have these conversations, and not just have the conversations, but I think it was mentioned, do the work. I think we've talked enough. I think everyone has talked enough. It's time to really, really motivate ourselves to do the work. And I hope that's what the Conservation Fund can be a part of and help lead. Specifically, we will continue learning, continue listening, and continue leading. And we hope by leading, I mean basically walking alongside of the sites. We're not here to tell anyone what to do. We want to support the visions and the goals that you all have because the history, as it was mentioned, is so important. Mayor Reed, you stole a line from me that I'm going to have to take from you as well. The cities are small, but the stories are big, and they're global in their impact, not local. There are people all around the world who know about Selma, and who know about Marion, who know about Whitehall and Montgomery. So we want to make sure that we protect those sites. We are looking for funding to help support the sites and help the communities. We are finishing up a grant that we hope will impact Marion, Selma, and Whitehall. We're working with the city of Montgomery on grant opportunities. We're having conversations with private funders. And so don't lose hope. We're hoping that this will be a renewed energy. The momentum that is building from partnerships and meetings like this. When I asked the mayors to do this, I got no hesitation. On a Saturday, I did plan it perfectly. There's no football today, so I was thinking ahead there. But we hope moving forward. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I know I invited the majority of people here. You all have my contact information. Please, this is what I love to do. I was fortunate to fall in this position. I love history. I'm passionate about it. So I don't mind calls. I learn something new every time I talk to a different site. There's history still being uncovered. And so we hope moving forward that you understand that there's support for you all. There's a desire to see you all succeed. There's a desire to see the communities that you all represent succeed, the cities that you all represent succeed, and the Conservation Fund hopes to be a partner in that. 12:04, I was hoping to get you out here at 12 on the dot. I have my card here. I'm going to be here afterwards, so if there's any site here that I have not met, please, let me know, and we will certainly make those connections. And before, one last thing. If you're from Perry County and you represent a site in Perry County, can you just raise your hand? Awesome, Perry County. If you're from Selma or Dallas County and you represent a site, can you raise your hand? Awesome. And if you're from Lowndes County and you represent a site, can you raise your hand? Awesome. And lastly, Montgomery. If you represent a site from Montgomery or the city of Montgomery, if you can raise your hand. So, mayors, you have your community, and you have your partners who are ready to work with you all and lead this effort. And we can't thank you all enough for being here. Thank you all enough for your dedication to this history. And it's important what you all are doing, and it's important what the mayors hope to do. So once again, thank you all for coming out on a Saturday morning. You didn't have to do that, so we're certainly appreciative. Moving forward, there will be more information coming out, so please, if you're a site that needs support in whatever way, we may not be able to do everything, but there are certainly some things that we can do, and we certainly look forward to supporting you all in that effort. So thank you all very much for coming.
Let me ask you